Okay, so now that we've incorporated React Auth a little bit more deeply into our application, right? We're loading the user, we know when their auth state changes, etc. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that only authenticated users can access most of the pages in our app, except for, of course, the login and create pages, which we're going to want to make sure only unauthenticated users can access. Okay, so you might remember that earlier when we did this, with our friend tracker app, for example, what we did is we created a separate private route component or something like that, which basically allowed us to pass in whether or not the user was authed, right? We had a prop that looked something like that, is authed. And it also allowed us to pass in whether or not we were currently loading the user, right? In other words, if we currently didn't know whether the user was authed or not. And we're going to follow a similar approach for the component we're going to create here. The main difference here is that instead of just caring whether the user is authed or not, we're eventually going to want to use more complex logic to determine whether or not a user can access a page. So essentially what we're going to do is instead of having is authed, we're just going to have a prop that'll be called something like can access. And that will allow us to basically pass in some kind of Boolean combination of different variables, and that will end up determining whether or not the user can visit that page. So just to give you an example of this, eventually when we add the ability to share notes with other users to our application, whenever a user goes to the note detail page of a shared note, we're going to want to check whether they actually have access to that. And if they don't have access, we're going to want to redirect them to some kind of like, yeah, you don't have access page, something like that. And on the other hand, if they do have access, we'll just let them see the page. So here's what this is going to look like. We're going to create a new component in our components folder. We're going to say new file, and we'll call this protected route. I think that might have been the same name we used before, but this is going to be a slightly different kind of protected route, so that's not a big deal. And here's what this component's going to look like. We're going to say export const protected route equals, and inside here for the props, we're going to say can access. We're going to say is loading, and then we'll take the rest of the props that we would normally pass to a route, and we'll use these if we end up displaying an actual route here. So here's what this is going to look like. We're going to say if is loading, then we're just going to return a paragraph tag here with the loading text, like that. Otherwise, we want to check if the user is able to access this thing, and if they're not, right, if can access is false, we're going to want to return a redirect, and that will redirect them to one of the pages of our application. Now, that's actually another prop we're going to add to this protected route, is a prop that will allow us to specify where we want to redirect the user to if it turns out that they can't access this, this route here. So what that's going to look like, we're just going to add a redirect to prop to our protected route, and that will be passed to the to prop of our redirect component. So we'll say to redirect to. Okay, and we do have to import the redirect component up here at the top from React Router DOM. And then down below, the next thing we're going to do is say return. And if is loading is false and can access is true, that means the user is free to see the page. So we're just going to return a basic route here. We'll say ... props. And that should be all we need to do for this protected route. So let's see how to use this thing now. What we're going to do is open up our routes.js file. And inside here, we're going to swap out all of our routes with the protected route component that we just created. So let's start off by importing that. We're going to say import protected route from components / protected route. Oops, let me try that again. Protected route, there we go. And then we're going to swap out all of these routes with that protected route component. So starting off with our redirect route here. We don't technically have to do this one because we could just change our notes page to a protected route and let that handle all of the logic. But just to avoid any unnecessary logic happening in there, let's just add it to both. So we're going to say protected route and protected route. And first of all, we're going to say can access, and this is going to either be true or false based on whether or not the user currently exists in our application. Now, we currently don't have access to that data from inside our routes component, so that's something we're going to have to add a little later. But for now, up here at the top of our routes, let's just say const is logged in, and we'll say equals false, right? This will just be for testing to make sure our protected route component works. And for can access, we're just going to pass in is logged in. And we're going to say if the user is not logged in, right? If the user can't access the page, we're going to say redirect to equals, and we'll redirect them to the login page. Okay, so that's our first protected route. The second one's going to look a lot like it, so I'm just going to copy and paste that and change the path here to notes. And that should be our notes route there. Okay, I'll just copy and paste that tag there as well. So right away, let's just test these two routes out. What we're going to do, oops, it looks like we need to import route into our protected route. Actually, I already did that. I think I just need to refresh the page here. Nope, I stand corrected. Let's go back to protected route now. And sure enough, we need to import route. I was remembering importing redirect is why I was so confident that I had done it. So let's go back here, and what we're going to see is that if we try and go to the notes page now, it will automatically send us back to the login page. And likewise, if we try and go to the home route, it'll do the same thing. All right, so let's move on to our other routes in our application. The next one here is the note detail page. For this one, we're going to say can access equals is logged in. And this here will eventually be an example of a situation where we'll want to make sure that the user can access the page, taking into account more than just whether or not the user is logged in or not. Right? So if the user is logged in, we'll still have to see whether or not they have access to this page by checking to see whether or not the user either created that note or, has sharing privileges to that note. So that'll be something like note is shared with user or something like that, right? That's just an example of another piece of logic we'll eventually want to pass to each of our protected routes, okay? And with this one, we're going to say redirect to, and we'll redirect the user to the login route on that one as well. We're going to need to change this to a protected route as well, by the way. And that should be our note detail page. We'll go back and test that in a minute here once we've converted over our other ones. So next we come to our login page and our create account page. And these two are going to use protected routes as well, except the logic here is going to be a little bit reversed. We're going to redirect the user to the notes page if the user is already logged in, right? Because there's no reason for a logged in user to go to the login or create account page. So what we're going to do here, we're going to say protected route first of all. Protected route. Can access is going to be equal to not is logged in. And redirect to, as I said, we'll send them to the notes page. So we'll say /notes. Okay, and likewise for the create account page, we're going to do the same thing. Protected route. Protected route. There we go. Can access here is going to be equal to not is logged in. And redirect to is going to be equal to /notes. And that should be all we need to do. We're going to leave the not found page as a regular route because this is the one page where we don't really care whether the user is logged in or not. We're just going to allow any user to access this page whenever they want to because, frankly, in the situation where someone gets a not found page, they usually didn't want to be there anyway, and there's not really any information that we display about users on that page. So we just want to make that page accessible as a backup. All right, so let's test out this logic that we just added. We're going to try and access our login page, which we should be able to do here. We can also access our create account page if we open that up. However, if we try and go to the notes page, we'll see that that will redirect us automatically to our login page. And if we try and go to the note detail page, right, notes 1, 2, 3, that too will automatically redirect us. So that's our protected route component for now. We'll probably have to make changes to it as we go on and as the logic for checking whether or not someone can access a page gets more and more complex, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.